Hi, my name is Olivia. If you read the headline, you already know that much. But what you don't know is that my story isn't quite what it seems. I live in a quiet, sun-drenched part of Australia, surrounded by tall eucalyptus trees and the golden plains that stretch endlessly into the horizon. It's peaceful here, calm, and full of surprises. A few years ago, my husband Thomas and I made a heartfelt decision to adopt a baby kangaroo who had tragically lost his mother. We named him Jack. Both of us have always been passionate animal lovers, and from the moment Jack entered our lives, he became something more than just a rescued animal. He became part of our family. Jack was this clumsy little ball of fur at first, but over time he grew into a strong, energetic, and cheeky young kangaroo, almost like a big, goofy dog. He had this way of hopping around with boundless energy, always curious, always affectionate. I adored him. We all did. But what started as a beautiful bond began shifting in ways I never quite expected. As Jack grew older, he became unusually attached to me. It was sweet at first. He followed me wherever I went, leaped toward me with joy whenever I stepped outside, and gently nuzzled my hand, eager for attention and play. When I went out to run errands, he'd wait by the front door, his big brown eyes scanning for my return. And the moment I walked back in, he was there, sticking to me like a shadow. I brushed it off in the beginning. After all, it's not unheard of for animals to form deep bonds with their caretakers. But Jack's behavior, it started to become more intense, more possessive. He seemed to see me as more than just a caregiver, more like a companion, a best friend, or something else. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch scratching Jack's favorite spot behind his ears when I noticed Thomas watching me through the kitchen window. His brow was furrowed, and he had this odd expression on his face, half amused, half concerned. "Don't you think you're spending a little too much time with Jack?" he asked as I came inside. I laughed it off. "Come on, Thomas. He's just a kangaroo. He's like a pet." But Thomas didn't seem convinced. He muttered something I couldn't catch and turned away, leaving me standing there a little puzzled. I thought maybe he was just joking, teasing me like always. But over the next few days, I noticed his gaze lingering on me more often, especially when I was with Jack. He'd give me these strange looks, half suspicious, half hurt, as though I were doing something wrong. There wasn't anything inappropriate about my bond with Jack. Of course not. But Thomas's silence began to grow louder than any words. I started feeling awkward around Jack, suddenly aware of every little gesture, every laugh. Then, one night at dinner, Thomas brought it up again. "So, how was your day with Jack?" His tone was light, but his eyes weren't. I chuckled, trying to brush it off. "Really, Thomas? It's not like Jack and I are jetting off to Paris together." But he didn't laugh. He just stared down at his plate, barely touching his food. "I don't know Olivia," he said quietly. "You spend more time with him than you do with me. I can't remember the last time you looked at me the way you look at him." The weight of his words hit me like a stone. I hadn't realized how deeply this was affecting him. As absurd as the whole thing sounded, it clearly mattered. I felt a mix of guilt and disbelief. Jack was just an animal. But Thomas was my husband, my partner, my everything. The next day, I tried to pull back. I stayed indoors, focused on chores, called some friends, kept myself busy. But the more I withdrew, the more Jack seemed to long for me. He waited by the windows, pawed at the door, watched my every move with eyes that seemed full of emotion. It was heartbreaking in its own way. Eventually, I gave in. One warm afternoon, I stepped outside just to check on him. Jack immediately bounded over, pressing his head against my hand like he'd been waiting all day just for that moment. I sat down, gave him a soft pat, and let myself laugh again, if only for a second. But then I saw it, Thomas's car rolling up the drive. I panicked, stood up quickly, tried to compose myself. As Thomas stepped out, his eyes locked onto Jack, then onto me. There was a storm in his expression, something raw and unsettled. Before I could even explain, Jack leapt toward me, nuzzling my shoulder with affection. Thomas stood frozen, watching the scene like it was a painting he couldn't make sense of. "I thought you were going to spend less time with him," he said, his voice trembling. Unbelievable. Then he turned away, the door swinging behind him as I stood there, caught between the deep, innocent bond of a creature who only knew love and the complicated, very human heart of the man I vowed to love forever. That night, Thomas barely spoke. Every time I tried to lighten the mood, his face would harden, his eyes narrowing with a quiet, simmering frustration. It was one of the most uncomfortable evenings we'd shared in years, full of unspoken words and heavy silence that pressed like a storm cloud refusing to break. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I reached for his hand and gently pulled him to face me. "Thomas," I whispered, "you're treating this like I'm doing something wrong, like Jack is more than just a kangaroo to me. And I know he isn't. You know he isn't." But he held my gaze, the pain in his eyes deeper than I expected. "That's the thing, Olivia. It feels like he is. I come home, and it's like you and Jack have this little world of your own. I'm on the outside, looking in." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. I stared at him, my heart softening, and reached up to cup his face. "If you've been feeling pushed aside, Thomas, I'm so sorry. That was never my intention. I never wanted you to feel replaced." His shoulders loosened just slightly, but the suspicion didn't completely fade. I miss you. I miss us. I know it sounds silly, but it feels like Jack gets more of you than I do." And he was right, not in the way he feared, but in the way that Jack had silently crept into the center of our daily life. Innocently, affectionately, and without boundaries. The tension lingered for the next few days like a shadow that neither of us knew how to cast off. I made a point to spend more time with Thomas, to be present and mindful. I even kept my distance from Jack, not out of guilt, but out of love for Thomas, for our marriage. One lazy afternoon, Thomas was at work, and I busied myself outside, hanging laundry under the soft breeze. I thought the air might clear my head, that space and time would settle things. Jack was nowhere to be seen, which was unusual, but I assumed he was out exploring the back part of the land, chasing butterflies or sunbathing in the tall grass. I allowed myself a breath of calm, thinking maybe, just maybe, things were starting to feel normal again. But Jack had other plans. From across the yard, I heard the unmistakable thump of powerful legs hitting the earth in quick rhythm. My heart jumped as I turned. There he was, bounding toward me with that unstoppable joy, his eyes shining like he hadn't seen me in years. Before I could react, he was at my side, nudging my hand, hopping around like an oversized puppy eager to play. I laughed to spite myself, shaking my head. "Jack, you impossible creature." Just as I reached to pat his head, the sound of tires on gravel stole the breath from my chest. I looked up, and there it was, Thomas's car pulling into the driveway earlier than expected. My hand froze where it rested on Jack's head, and a flicker of panic sparked in my chest. Thomas stepped out slowly, his eyes moving from me to Jack, then back again. Whatever calm had built between us in the past few days began to unravel in an instant. His expression twisted into disbelief, followed by something darker. "Really, Olivia?" His voice cracked as he strode toward us. "I thought we talked about this." I tried to explain, but the words tangled on my tongue. Thomas looked between us like he was witnessing a betrayal. "This is unbelievable," he muttered, hands clenching together. "I walk in and you're cuddling him like he's not what you think he is." "Thomas," I started, but even as I spoke, I realized how ridiculous the situation must have looked. "He's just a kangaroo," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Thomas pointed to Jack, who stood beside me, gazing up at both of us with wide, innocent eyes. "This whole thing, it's gone too far, Olivia. You act like you've chosen him over me." For a moment, I was stunned into silence. Then, without warning, I burst into laughter. I know, probably the worst thing I could have done in that moment. But it was all just too absurd. The idea that I, a grown woman, could be accused of cheating with a kangaroo? My laughter poured out uncontrollably, the kind that shakes your whole body and leaves you breathless. Thomas stared at me, bewildered. Then, slowly, the corners of his mouth began to twitch. A reluctant chuckle slipped out, and then another. Before long, we were both standing there in the middle of the yard, howling with laughter, our sides aching, tears in our eyes. Jack tilted his head in that adorable, puzzled way, as if he were wondering what kind of strange human ritual he was witnessing. When we finally calmed down, Thomas wiped his eyes and shook his head. You do realize how ridiculous this sounds, right? I do, I said, catching my breath. But come on, you have to admit Jack is hard to ignore. He's like a little brother, or a very annoying toddler. Thomas looked at Jack again, sighing. Yeah, I guess he is, but let's agree he's not that kind of family member. We stood there for a while, watching Jack bounce around the sun, blissfully unaware of the drama he'd stirred up. And somehow, in that moment, everything settled. The tension, the confusion, it melted away. In the days that followed, life went back to normal, or at least our version of it. Thomas no longer saw Jack as a rival, but as the odd, lovable addition to our family that he truly was. The whole ridiculous saga somehow brought us closer. It reminded us to laugh more, to communicate better, to not take life or each other so seriously all the time. And now, whenever we tell the story to friends or family, it always ends in fits of laughter. Thomas rolls his eyes and says, only in Australia could a guy think his wife was cheating on him with a kangaroo. And you know what? He's not wrong.